You wake up in darkness, not the poetic kind. No moonlight slanting through iron bars, no torches flickering like dramatic metaphors. Just darkness, the kind that smells like mildew, wet straw, and historical regret. Your wrists itch from the iron manacles that didn't fit even when they were new, which was approximately 6 crusades ago. Your ankles are chained to a ring in the floor, and your dignity is chained to a memory of that time you thought this would be a short stay. Before we crawl any deeper into this charming medieval oubliette, take a moment, just a short one, to like this story and subscribe to our cozy little corner of decaying history, but only if the sound of damp stone and existential futility helps you drift off. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what hour your candle's burning low. I always love knowing which anxious night owls are joining us across the ages. Now, dim the lights, if you have any, and maybe set a fan humming for that soft background buzz. Let's descend together into tonight's tale of shackles, shadows, and absolutely no rescue attempts. Back to you, lying flat on your back, staring at the ceiling you can't see, wondering whether that was a rat, a bat, or a hallucination caused by low medieval blood sugar. Spoiler, it's all three. Someone coughs in the next cell, or possibly dies. The acoustics are ambiguous. You mutter a prayer to Saint Jude, the patron saint of lost causes and people who volunteered to help just for a few days. Chains rattle in reply, either a ghost or your neighbor stretching his ghost legs. You sit up. The straw mattress underneath you is the same texture as ancient punishment. It's also alive. You don't know with what, but it wriggles occasionally, like guilt or fermented cheese. Outside, a guard stomps past. You can tell he's a guard because of the rhythmic jangle of keys and the audible sigh of someone who peaked in 1294. He doesn't stop. He never stops. That's rule 1 in this place. Nobody's coming. Not for you. Not for anyone. It's not entirely your fault. You're here. Not entirely. There was that misunderstanding with the monk, the cheese cart, and the bishop's niece. But details are for people with trial dates, and you haven't seen parchment in months. The dungeon's stone walls are damp enough to grow their own theology. Something drips constantly in the corner. You've named it Bertrand. It speaks to you sometimes, usually in the language of despair. You shuffle toward the bowl in the corner, the one that's supposed to be for waste, but currently contains an aggressively suspicious turnip. You eat it anyway. It tastes like bitterness and the 12th century. Time doesn't pass here. It leaks. You measure the days by the mold rings on the wall, and they're currently suggesting it's Thursday or plague season. Either way, your odds aren't improving. You lie back again. The straw sighs. So do you. Somewhere above, a bell tolls. Not for you. Never for you. You close your eyes and imagine sunlight, wine, laughter, freedom. Then the wall belches, and the smell of damp despair slaps you back to reality. Welcome to the dungeon. You're going to be here a while, and no one's coming. You surface from a shallow, twitch-riddled sleep when something tiny skitters across your cheek and thoughtfully nibbles your eyebrow for protein. A swift slap sends the creature, possibly a flea, possibly the spirit of last night's regrets, tumbling into the straw. You lie still, blinking at the darkness until it ripples into recognizable shapes. Wall, ceiling arch, iron ring, your own shackles, coiled like sullen snakes. A single drop of water plinks from the vault overhead and detonates on the floor echoing through the stone corridor, with all the ceremonial gravity of a trumpet announcing you've won another day of captivity. Your back protests as you sit. Every vertebra feels like an unpaid debt. The morning routine arrives on schedule, which is to say, it happens whenever the guard gets bored of gambling with the executioner upstairs. A hatch clacks open at door level, and a bowl glides through, steaming faintly, followed by a wooden mug half filled with tepid well water, and one floating crumb that swims lazy circles like a defeated moth. You contemplate the meal with scholarly detachment. Last night's supper was an undercooked turnip served in rainwater. This porridge looks, by comparison, ambitious. Gray, lumpy ambitions, but ambitions nonetheless. You stir it with your finger. Something twirled beneath the surface, pale and languid. You address it politely. Sir Larva, if you intend parasitism, please form an orderly queue behind the others. It ignores you, which is frankly rude, but you eat anyway, because rebellion burns calories you cannot spare. Across the corridor, Clarence coughs, then wheezes a greeting. He survived the night. A small victory for malnutrition everywhere. Morning. He rasps through stone and gloom. Anything new? You swallow a mouthful of gluey oats. The porridge includes a free ribbon worm today. We're moving up in the world. Clarence chuckles, a sound like parchment tearing, then lapses into silence, conserving breath for essential activities such as continued existence. A rat scuttles out of his cell, tail arched like a question mark, pauses to sniff your bowl, decides against socialism, and sprints off in search of bolder flavors. After breakfast comes what passes for exercise. You stand, rotate each limb to discourage rigor mortis, and pace the perimeter of your chain's radius. Exactly 7 hesitant steps east, 6.5 west, 5 north, because the wall juts in, and 4 south, before the fetter yanks you off balance. This walking pattern has worn a figure 8 groove in the straw, transforming your cell into a modest cartographer's nightmare. You dub it the labyrinth of acceptable distraction and award yourself a medal for endurance, a pebble excavated from your ear 3 nights prior, polished on your sleeve, and stuffed triumphantly into the seam of your ragged boot. Hours seep by. Dungeon hours are stealthy things. They approach unnoticed and leave fingerprints of fatigue on your eyelids. Somewhere above, bells toll for tierce or nonies. The liturgical schedule is kaleidoscopic when you can't see the sun. The guard returns, this time accompanied by unfamiliar footsteps. Keys jangle. Torches hiss. You freeze mid-pace as iron embeds in your ankle, heart thumping a drumline against your ribs. The procession stops at your door. Hinges shriek. Light, real flame light, splashes into your world, revealing dust motes in jubilant panic. 2 figures step inside. The usual turnkey, a dough-shaped man named Gervas, who smells of pickled onions, and an officious clerk armored in ledger books. The clerk's quill dangles from his ear like an exotic parasite. Inventory, he announces, voice pitched midway between boredom and contempt. He checks a parchment list, while Gervais prods your straw with the butt of a spear, counting blankets, 1, bowls, 1, prisoners, also 1, and miscellaneous organic matter of dubious allegiance, too numerous to tally. The clerk scribbles. Prisoner, still breathing. Blanket status, frayed. Evidence of sedition, inconclusive. He looks at you over the rim of his wax tablet. Any complaints? Dozen witty retorts stampede through your mind, but you settle on yes, my worm is undercooked. Gervais snorts derisively. The clerk writes, attitude, impertinent but creative, and gestures for the door. As they leave, he tacks a small notice to the exterior. Maintenance inspection complete. Cell conforms to minimum despair standards, Article 4. You consider requesting a gold star. Decide sarcasm would be wasted on parchment, and resume pacing mid-afternoon or whenever. The dungeon orchestra picks up. Dripping water, percussion, distant clang of blacksmiths forging shackles you pray never to meet. The melancholy whistle of wind slithering through arrow slits. You sit cross-legged and practice your favorite pastime, remembering colors. There was cardinal red on a merchant's cloak, verdigris on a church spire, the impossible cerulean of midsummer sky. You lay them side by side in your mind like stained glass fragments, hoping one day sunlight will pass through again. The guards change shift at what they call dusk, though judging by the persistent chill, dusk moved in and never left. New footsteps shuffle down the hall, lighter, furtive, embroidered with the hush of someone who gets paid extra for secrets. Key rattles softly, your hatch slides open, and a slender hand pushes through a slip of parchment rolled into a tight coil. The hand vanishes before you can speak, replaced by retreating taps down the stone corridor. You unroll the note, squinting in the dark until the words resolve. Midnight. Left. Left. Stairs. Archive. Trapdoor. Bring nothing you can't carry quietly. W. Your pulse sprints. Wiggins the forger again. Mad, brave, or both. You hide the note under the straw, though any decent search would find it faster than fleas find ankles. You mutter a quick apology to Mozzarella and her colony. Their real estate is about to become contraband storage. Twilight drags itself across unseen ramparts while you make preparations. Preparations in your current vocabulary consist of stretching wrists to navigate shackles, loosening the peg that anchors your chain, a task you've rehearsed nightly, rotating the metal ring until the mortar surrounding it crumbles like stale gingerbread, and reciting every prayer that might grant you a centimeter of luck. You test the peg, wiggle left, wiggle right, and feel it shift a hair's breadth. Progress. You pause, listening. Silence except for Clarence coughing in tones of suppressed conspiracy. Call softly. Clarence. You awake? A rasp. As ever. Midnight. I'm leaving. A damp pause. Take me, he whispers. You stare into blackness. You have never seen Clarence. For all you know, he's a hallucination, constructed by echo and desperation. Yet the plea scrapes your conscience. Can you walk? Another cough, fragile as moth wings hitting stone. Probably not, but I can crawl. Your logical brain presents a spreadsheet of risks. Noise, delay, double weight on creaking boards. Your human brain responds with a shrug and a single word, together, and wins the argument. All right, you say. Be ready when I call. The hours between vow and action dissolve at geologic speed. Your heart drums so loudly, you're sure the rats have filed a noise complaint. Finally, a distant bell strikes 12. Each reverberation trembles in the chain around your ankle, like a countdown. You twist, yank, and the peg slithers free with a muted crack. You coil the chain over your shoulder, praying each link stays polite. Hatch first. You push. It opens. A simple latch you've oiled for weeks, with stolen drips of lamp grease. You ease one arm through, contort, and curl yourself into the corridor like a newly birthed and exceedingly displeased calf. Across, Clarence's hatch gapes in expectation. You whisper his name. A pale hand emerges, followed by elbows, knees, an entire scarecrow of a man smelling of mildew and brittle determination. He collapses beside you, gulping breaths as though air were brandy. You support him under one arm. He weighs less than your chain. The passage ahead yawns left. Following Wiggins's map, you limp along, left past the guard room. Snoring resonates inside. Good. Left again at a junction marked by a toppled brazier. Then straight. Cobwebs string across the corridor, like harp strings. Each one plucks a note when the chain brushes past. You clutch the links to mute them, but their cold weight tattles on every heartbeat. Stairs appear, a spiral fighting its own geometry. You maneuver Clarence upward, each step a diplomatic negotiation between gravity and willpower. Halfway, a torch sconce offers flame. You do not risk it. Darkness is your accomplice. At the landing, a narrow arch leads into the archive. Shelves sagging with scrolls, long forgotten by justice. The air is heavy with dust and the sweeter decay of ink. You scan for a trapdoor. Nothing obvious. Wiggins's shaky arrow had pointed vaguely toward the room's center. You shuffle scrolls, brush aside a collapsed lectern, and there, a square outline, iron ring, recessed flush with oak planks. You jiggle the ring, expecting squeal and betrayal, but it lifts silently. Someone has oiled it recently, likely Wiggins. Bless his criminal heart. Below yawns black emptiness. A rope dangles into the void, knotted at intervals. You tie Clarence's chain around your waist, secure your grip, and descend. Cold, damp void envelops you until boots splash into ankle-deep water. An old drainage tunnel, pungent with secrets. Clarence slithers after, wheezing but intact. You coax him onto his feet and slog forward. The tunnel ceiling kisses your scalp. Clarence hunches like a penitent shadow. Minutes, or centuries. Later, faint moonlight glimmers ahead through a rusted grate. You press both hands against the bars. They wobble. One final heave and they pop free, clattering into wet grass outside the curtain wall. Night air, crisp and wild with stars, floods your lungs. You drag Clarence through, collapsing on the embankment beneath a sky so vast it feels obscene. Freedom smells of moss and manure and infinite possibility. It also smells of dogs, because a kennel yard lies 30 paces north, and the inhabitants are now barking their scholarly analysis of your escape. You grip Clarence's elbow. Move. Together you limp towards copse of alder trees beyond the ditch. The dogs surge behind, iron-shod paws churning mud. Somewhere on the battlements, alarm bells shatter the night. Crossbowmen bark orders. The universe conspires to fetch you back to your cell. You throw yourself into reeds, haul Clarence beside you, and submerge to the chin in icy ditch water. The dogs arrive, overshoot, double back, noses to ground. One hound pauses at the ditch's edge, eyes luminous, ears perked. You hold breath until your lungs beg for mutiny. The hound snorts, apparently offended by hygiene standards, and trots on. Footsteps fade. Bells fade. The world, astonished, settles. Clarence exhales a watery laugh. We did it. Half did it. You correct. Now we only need food, clothes, money, a map, disguises, aliases, and perhaps an army. You glance skyward. The moon winks, as if to say, good luck with that. But even sarcasm from celestial objects can't dim the spark in your chest. A stubborn, sputtering flame that looks suspiciously like hope. You pull Clarence onto the bank, peel weeds from your hair, and whisper to the night. Step 1, survive till dawn. Step 2, improvise the rest. Far behind, the dungeon swallows its own alarms. Offended you dared to leave. Ahead, forest shadows beckon. dense with peril, but blessedly doorless. You choose peril. You choose forward. The mud sucks at your boots, like the past refusing surrender. You yank free, guiding Clarence between black-skinned trunks, deeper into uncertainty and the thrilling terror of possibilities. Somewhere in those trees, perhaps half a league or a lifetime away, Wiggins waits with ink-stained hands and a grin too wide for his face. Beside him, you imagine, sits a loaf of bread that doesn't judge, a fire that doesn't burn for confessions, and a plan stitched together with desperation and improbable courage. You cannot yet see that far, but you see enough. The next step, then the step after, and as you take them, shackles clinking a hallelujah cadence, you realize the chain on your ankle is lighter than the fear you left behind. Dawn seeps into the forest like weak tea, tinting the mist a bruised yellow that does little for morale. You spent the night marching Clarence through underbrush, dense enough to qualify as a hedge maze designed by lunatics. Every branch conspired to autograph your face. Every root attempted homicide. Clarence, equal parts gratitude and gangrene, now leans against an alder, wheezing softly while you pick twigs from his hair. His complexion reminds you of parchment left too close to a damp wall, fragile, spotty, and obviously about to tear. Somewhere behind you, the dungeon's bells have fallen silent, which means either the hounds lost your scent, or the guards decided chasing two skeletal escapees wasn't worth skipping breakfast. You hope it's the latter. You're counting on their laziness the way sailors count on stars. The forest floor under your boots squelches with last night's rain. Each step sounds like a chef slapping dough, which feels thematically appropriate. You are half-baked, under-seasoned, and praying not to be served at the next public execution. You pause to study the trees. They all look identical, tall, morose, and secretly judging your sense of direction. Wiggins's instructions ended with "follow the alder ridge" until you find the rock that looks like a sermon about to collapse, which is useful only if sermons look like rocks to you, which they do not. You inhale cold air that tastes of moss and impending rash decisions. All right, you tell Clarence. Orientation time. He grunts, possibly in agreement, possibly in Latin. Your coughs have become bilingual. You rummage through your meager inventory. One length of chain, decorative, ankle edition, a half-rotted leather boot, left, 2 pocket pebbles, masquerading as morale boosters, and a scrap of dried turnip you saved for emergencies such as starvation or interpersonal bribery. Nothing terribly navigational. A low growl blossoms behind you like an unpleasant idea. You turn very slowly to behold a wolf, no, 2, no, 3, emerging from the mist, eyes phosphorescent with the glow of beings that have never filed a tax return. They study you with the calm professionalism of auditors. You consider the turnip scrap. Wolves prefer protein, but maybe they've adopted exotic diets. You toss it experimentally. It lands with a pathetic thud. The lead wolf sniffs, sneezes, and advances. Clarence, to his credit, raises himself to most of his full height, brandishing a broken tree limb like a knight brandishing a wet noodle. You take the heavier end of the chain, swing it once, and discover it lacks both range and intimidation value, but does make a heroic link. Before you script a last will and testament, a sharp whistle slices through the dawn. The wolves freeze, ears swiveling. Another whistle, 3 quick notes, and a descending trill, like a bird that's too smug for its own feathers. The wolves back away, melting into fog. You blink, baffled. Then you see him, Wiggins, stepping from behind a yew, cloak tattered, but eyes bright with conspiratorial glee. He lowers a small bone flute, the source of the whistle, and bows. You made it, he says, as though the journey were a pleasant stroll through an herb garden. We nearly became hors d'oeuvres, you mutter. Nonsense, Wiggins replies. Those wolves owe me dinner favors. Long story. He tosses Clarence a leather water skin. Drink. Clarence gulps, like a drowning monk, blessed with sudden air. Wiggins gestures for you to follow, and sets off at a brisk trot, weaving between oaks with the confidence of a man who once mapped every contraband footpath in the county. You drag Clarence in pursuit. The sun climbs through skeletal branches, outlining your breath in silver ribbons. Somewhere far off, a rooster crows. You vow to punch the next rooster you meet out of pure principle. After 15 minutes, the trees thin, and a clearing uncurls like a green sigh. At its center squats a stone ruin, half a watchtower, half a moral lesson about hubris. Ivy garlands dangle from cracked parapets. A wooden ladder leans inside what used to be a doorway. Wiggins climbs first, disappearing through a ragged hatch. You and Clarence follow, emerging onto a platform of splintered planks sheltered by a sagging canvas canopy. Beneath the canopy waits breakfast, an iron pot simmering over embers, exhaling the aroma of actual vegetables mingled with something meaty enough to inspire hope. There's bread too, coarse but real, and a lump of cheese that hasn't cursed you yet. You stare, caught between reverence and suspicion. Help yourselves, Wiggins says, ladling stew into wooden bowls. Mind the bones. The rabbit donated them under protest. You and Clarence eat with the frenzy of men hired to impersonate threshing machines. The stew is scalding, earthy, and carries exactly 3 identifiable flavors, all glorious. Bread follows, crusty and tasting faintly of salvation. Cheese smuggles salt back into your veins. For the first time in forever, you are human again, not merely inventory. When bowls are polished clean, Wiggins clears his throat like a conspirator, summoning the minutes of last night's coup. We have a window, he begins. The sheriff will comb the western road by noon. Therefore we travel east, cross the marsh at dusk, and reach the river ford before curfew. Once we're over the water, jurisdiction muddles faster than monastic soup. You lick stew from your thumb. And after the ford, a safe house run by a friend of mine, a miller with ethics as flexible as his flour prices. Wiggins unfurls a crude map on the plank floor. Charcoal lines mark forest trails, marsh crossings, and ominous skull doodles. Where north should be, an arrow simply says, probably. You raise an eyebrow. Wiggins shrugs. Cartography is a conversational art. Clarence studies the route, lips twitching through silent math. How many miles? 7 as the crow flies, Wiggins says. But crows own better boots. More like 11 for us. Clarence can barely shuffle, you point out. Clarence raises a skeletal hand. I can limp heroically. We'll adjust the pace, Wiggins assures. But we must leave before the sun's fully up. Tracking is harder, while dew still fools the dogs. You glance at your chain. It still clings to your ankle, trailing 4 feet of iron evidence. Wiggins notices. Allow me. He produces a blacksmith's wedge and a mallet the size of a philosophical quibble. 2 deft strikes, and the shackle pops like a disgruntled oyster. Blood rushes back to flesh. Pins and needles perform an interpretive dance from toes to knee. Clarence's manacle proves more stubborn, but a third swing cracks it open. He massages his ankle, eyes watering with equal parts pain and relief. Step outside, Wiggins says, and test your freedom. You descend to the clearing. No rattling iron, no tug. The sensation is indecently light, as though gravity misplaced your file. You almost expect to float away. Wiggins shoulders a burlap sack. Supplies: bread, smoked eel, 2 apples, 1 bottle of inferior wine, useful mainly for bribes or disinfecting. He hands you a stubby dagger, edge wavering like drunken philosophy. Keep it hidden. Use it loud. Clarence receives a walking stick fashioned from hazelwood. He grips it like a scepter, which would be funny if he didn't look so convincingly royal in his tatters. Wiggins nods toward the trees. Eastward, you march. Birds gossip overhead, scandalized by your wardrobe. Each step squashes ferns still silver with dawn. Wiggins sets a merciful pace, halting often to listen for pursuit. Nothing but rustling leaves and the occasional distant moo. Twice, he detours to avoid game trails, where hoofprints suggest patrolling men on horseback. You prefer the longer route. Hoofprints represent hooves, hooves represent mounted guards, and mounted guards represent repeat dungeon performances. By midday, hunger returns, like an uninvited in-law. But the trio presses on until a ridge of shale offers both view and shelter. You slump beneath an outcrop shaped like a collapsed sermon, apparently Wiggins's earlier reference. From here the land slopes into a patchwork of fields, each stitched by hedgerows and threaded with smoke from cottage chimneys. Somewhere hidden in that quilt lies the marsh, and beyond it, the river. Far behind, the forest crouches like a conspirator, swallowing any evidence you once existed. Lunch is bread, dipped in wine strong enough to negotiate peace treaties. Clarence eats little, conserving energy for breathing. Yet you see color creep back to his cheeks, faint but promising. Wiggins carves the smoked eel, distributing slices with the solemnity of communion. You chew, savoring salt and rebellion. Conversation drifts toward plans. Clarence speaks of a sister in the south, if she hasn't married a bishop or buried one. You confess to nothing because your last known relative sold you to debt collectors, which didn't work out for either party. Wiggins, unsurprisingly, is vague. I have acquaintances in many towns, though some might use harsher nouns. Still, he assures, safe havens dot the realm like freckles on a freckle. When sun tips west, the march resumes. The terrain dips into bogland, reeds rattling in a breeze that smells of wet secrets. Mud clasps your boots like needy suitors. Once, Clarence sinks to the knee. You and Wiggins haul him out, leaving a boot to feed the mud's vanity. He limps barefoot afterward, toes wrinkled, dignity threadbare, but not expired. Dusk paints the sky, bruised violet by the time you spot the ford. A dark ribbon of water sliding between alder banks, ford markers, poles wrapped in rotten cloth, poking up like neglected candles. Beyond, torches shimmer on a distant road. Travelers or patrol, impossible to judge. Wiggins crouches, scrawls rough arithmetic in the mud. We cross now. Night is our cloak, and patrol torches face away. He wades first, water lapping thighs. You support Clarence. The river bites with winter teeth. Halfway, a bat veers overhead like a leather accusation. You duck, sloshing. Cold clamps lungs. You push on, emerging on the far bank soaked to hips. Teeth practice in Morse code. No torches swing your way. Fortune, stunned by your audacity, forgets to punish you. You scramble into reeds, hide long enough to wring out rags, then follow Wiggins along a cattle path until the silhouette of a mill rises against the star-freckled sky. The wheel creaks like a chronic complainer, comforting because it masks footsteps. The miller appears in the doorway, lantern aloft. His beard could smuggle sparrows. His eyes, sharp as new nails, rake across your trio and settle on Wiggins with reluctant affection. You again. Just passing. Wiggins chirps. Passing counterfeit coin? Perish the thought. Friends in need of flower-scented anonymity. The miller sighs the sigh of men who know favors multiply faster than debts. Upstairs. Keep quiet. The chickens gossip. He ushers you into a loft, carpeted with grain sacks. The air smells of warm wheat and old wood, heaven after rot and chains. Blankets appear, coarse but clean. A clay jug of beer materializes, followed by 3 dented mugs. Wiggins raises his. 2 improbable mornings. You clink. The beer is flat, bitter, perfect. Clarence, eyelids drooping, murmurs, "Never thought freedom would taste like stale rabbit, muddy socks, and cold beer." You grin. Better menu than the dungeons. Beneath the floor, the mill wheel hums a lullaby older than the taxes that fund it. Rats skitter in beams overhead, distant cousins of the dungeon variety, less desperate, but equally opinionated. You slide beneath a blanket. Muscles protest, then melt. The dark this time is gentler, scented with straw instead of despair. Before sleep claims you, you whisper a promise to the roof. Tomorrow, you will find boots for Clarence, a map drawn by someone who understands North, and maybe, if fate is drowsy enough, papers proclaiming you legitimate citizens of somewhere no one searches. It's an absurd promise, huge and clunky and ill-suited to your resources. But in the soft rattle of grain against burlap, you hear the universe chuckle, as though absurd promises are its favorite bedtime stories. You close your eyes. Somewhere beyond the hills, dungeon bells resume their fruitless warning. They ring for ghosts now. You, Clarence, Wiggins, you're busy practicing the complicated art of not being ghosts. With any luck, you'll have years to perfect it. Roosters declare sunrise with the self-importance of minor nobles, and you retaliate by burying your head beneath a sack that used to hold rye. The sack smells of ambition and mouse nibble marks, but it is quieter than chickens. Unfortunately, breakfast arrives in the form of Wiggins, upending a scoop of bran onto your face. The resulting cough convinces him you're alive. He seems satisfied. Clarence surfaces from his blanket cocoon like a resurrected parchment, one bare foot twitching in search of the boot still lost to the marsh. His hazel walking stick naps beside him, dreaming of being a proper weapon. The mill loft glows pale gold as chaff motes float in sunlight slanting through gaps in the roof. Below, the wheel churns and the grindstones mutter. You inhale the scent of flour and freedom, a combination sweet enough to addict saints. Then the miller climbs the ladder, beard bristling with disapproval. News, he grunts, which in miller dialect means bad news, but possibly profitable. He sets down a clay jug and 3 chipped cups. Traveling bailiff stopped by at dawn, asked about fugitives. He'll return after market day. The miller eyes your ragged trousers, the prison chain still coiled like a pet serpent near your bedroll. Clarence's missing boot. You have till sundown to be someone else. Wiggins rubs his hands. Perfect. I was planning to be several someone else's today. He passes around cups of thin ale. Breakfast for people who distrust water. Agenda, he says, standing on an overturned crate like a street preacher. with questionable theology. 1. Boots for Clarence before his foot petitions for divorce. 2. Legitimate-looking travel papers for all of us. 3. Disguises suitable for crossing the toll bridge at River Ash. 4. Departure by sunset. You sip ale that tastes like yesterday's regrets, sprinkled with barley. Boots are simple. Papers are sorcery. Wiggins grins. Sorcery happens to be a hobby. He produces a packet of vellum sheets, a wax seal carved with someone else's family crest, and a vial of ink so black it seems to absorb hesitations. We'll be pilgrims, he says. Pilgrims are unfashionable, smell terrible, and ask for alms. Nobody wants them to linger long enough to verify documents. Clarence raises an eyebrow, the color of fainting. What saint? Saint Eustathius, of perpetual exile. Wiggins replies, without blinking. Patron of lost travelers, disputed inheritances, and mild foot rot. Feast day is conveniently tomorrow, which explains our urgency. The miller snorts. Eustathius is obscure, real, clever. I prefer plausible, Wiggins says. Obscure but real means the guards won't know the litany well enough to quiz us. Planning concludes over oatcakes stolen, borrowed indefinitely, from the mill's pantry. Clarence practices his limp, which is both authentic and dramatic. You stuff straw under your tunic to appear stouter, on the theory that fugitives rarely put on weight overnight. Wiggins shaves your surviving eyebrow into a monastic half-arc until you resemble a quizzical ferret who's taken holy orders. Clarence's hair is dusted with flour for elder credibility, while Wiggins ties a rope around his own waist as a penitential belt. Costumes sorted, the miller lends you a donkey cart to fetch grain, which you will naturally forget to return. The donkey is named Melancholy. He earned it. His pace could be measured with a sundial during a solar eclipse. Still, carts have storage benefits. Clarence can rest his blistering foot, and your prison chain can masquerade as harness gear. You trundle toward Leechford Village, a cluster of timbered houses embracing a market square like gossip clinging to a rumor. On the way, Wiggins rehearses your cover story. You're from the shrine of Eustathius in the northern fens, journeying south to petition the bishop for relic authentication. Because bureaucracy adores itself, he explains. You will blame any holes in the narrative on contemplative silence. Leechford's market bustles with traders, hawking everything from eels that might still be plotting escape to ribbons dyed colors nature refuses to endorse. The bailiff's banner, a blue boar rampant, hangs on the Guildhall, but the bailiff himself is absent, probably extorting bread taxes. You park Melancholy near a trough, where he contemplates drowning himself out of boredom. First objective, boots. You steer Clarence to a cobbler's stall, run by a woman whose forearms could bench press regret. She eyes Clarence's single boot with professional revulsion. Swamp casualty, she asks. You nod piously. A test of St. Eustathius's humility, Clarence adds, which impresses her enough to fetch a pair of second-hand leather ankle boots that still remember their previous owner's toe alignment. Haggling costs 2 copper pennies, and Wiggins's promise to pray for her sciatica. Everyone agrees. That's a bargain. Next, papers. Wiggins leads you to the scribe's booth, a lean-to decorated with samples of calligraphy so ornate they require footnotes. The scribe, Master Florestan, squints through spectacles thick as gilt. Wiggins presents blank vellum, requesting 3 letters of pilgrimage, safe conduct. Florestan sniffs. 5 pennies per seal. 10 if you want them before compline. Done. Wiggins says, sliding 4 pennies forward. We're pilgrims, good sir. Poverty is our perfume. Might a discount secure us the blessing of haste? Florestan eyes Wiggins's ink vial. That's imported nightshade carbon. Worth 3 pennies alone. Wiggins smiles and hands it over. Deal struck. Florestan ducks into his hut to scribe. While waiting, you notice a notice. A crudely etched wanted poster nailed to a post. 2 figures, rendered in optimistic strokes. One tall, gaunt man, one shorter, with unspecified eyebrows, are labeled escaped felons. Reward 20 silver. The artist gifted you both full bellies and decent grooming. Flattering, but inconvenient. You gently rotate the poster so it faces a wall. Boots acquired, papers half complete. You need pilgrim accessories, walking staves, scallop shells, maybe a devotional badge. Peddler sells tin badges shaped like hands, feet, and suspiciously modern ducks. Wiggins buys 3 feet. St. Eustathius walked a lot, he claims, pinning them to your cloaks. They rattle like gilt. Back at Florestan's booth, you collect the documents. Elegant Latin certifying that Brother Alfred, you, Brother Cyward, Wiggins, and Elder Brother Clarence, are en route to Bishop Athelmar's see. Each bears the bailiff's seal. Florestan evidently keeps a range of contraband stamps. You tip him the nightshade carbon. He sighs, like a man who just adopted a sin. Market tasks complete. You herd melancholy out of town before the bailiff returns. The donkey lurches along a rutted track toward the toll bridge. Afternoon heat rises. Insects drone. Clarence dozes amid sacks of bogus grain. Wiggins reviews the safe conduct letters. Convincingly dull, he declares. Halfway to the river, you spot dust clouds. A patrol of 4 mounted guards, trotting the road behind you. They close the gap faster than melancholy can conceive motion. Stay calm, Wiggins murmurs, adjusting his rope belt with the serenity of a man standing on an active volcano and complimenting the view. The guards draw abreast, lances upright. Their leader, a sergeant with a nose resembling a surrender flag, inspects your humble procession. Purpose of travel? You recite, pilgrimage to His Excellency, Bishop Athelmar, carrying petitions from the shrine of St. Eustathius. The sergeant squints. Eustathius, the hermit who preached in a swamp and died of irony? You nod. Patron of travelers and spontaneous misfortune. A guard at the rear mutters, could use that blessing on payroll day. Wiggins produces the safe conduct documents. The sergeant accepts, flattens each with armored fingers, frowns at the seal, then at your eyebrows, then at Clarence's flour-dusted hair. Looks proper, he concedes, handing them back. Beware cut purses near the bridge. 2 were hanged yesterday. Sometimes that encourages cousins. He spurs his horse. The patrol rides on, dust cloaking their cynicism. You exhale so violently, melancholy startles into a brisk trot, which is to say, he walks slightly faster than a continental drift. Wiggins grins. Paper shields, my friend. Never underestimate stationery. The toll bridge emerges from willows. Stone piers, timber planks, a gatehouse with murder slits gazing like suspicious eyelids. A tollkeeper lounges on a stool, tally board in lap. A rope barrier bars the way. You queue behind a wagon of geese, exercised by existential dread. Geese pay in honks and feathers. The tollkeeper stamps a chit and waves them through. When your turn arrives, Wiggins offers the safe conduct letters. The tollkeeper barely glances, literacy not being a core job requirement. 2 pennies for the cart one per head. Donkeys free because I dislike precedence. You pay with Floristan's last copper. Keeper lifts the rope. Melancholy steps onto the planks, which creak theatrical warnings. Below, the river flashes silver. Halfway across, Clarence peers over the railing. Face pale, but determined. I had not expected to see water from on top of it ever again. You clap his shoulder. Enjoy the novelty. We'll be back to mud soon. On the far bank, a lane snakes between barley fields toward low hills. Sun chisels everything gold, except your stomach, which grumbles the color of emptiness. Wiggins guides you off the road into a copse where a ruined chapel lurks among nettles. Tonight's shelter, he announces. The miller's beers are lovely, but the bailiff will sniff us by dusk. Inside the chapel, ivy drapes the altar like an over-enthusiastic penitent. Broken pews provide firewood. You dig a hearth in the earthen floor, strike sparks with flint, and coax flames while Clarence retrieves bread, cheese, and dried apple slices from the cart's stash. Supper is humble, but unthreatening. A pleasant surprise. Wiggins eats in thoughtful silence, then unfurls a fresh scrap of parchment. Stage 2, he says. Tomorrow, we reach Hart Hill Crossroads, where a tinker named Old Nan sells more than kettles. She can direct us to passage south. Covert wagons, river barges, creative burial caskets, whatever suits. From there, we vanish into counties that write fewer warrants. You nod, poking the fire until sparks swarm like frantic fireflies. Clarence mutters a prayer to any saint still awake. Wind sighs through broken stained glass holes, carrying scents of barley and distant hearth smoke. Homes full of problems smaller than yours, probably. Night settles. You spread cloak and sack as bedding. The donkey huffs outside, dreaming of fields where existentialism requires less effort. The safe conduct letters lie tucked in your belt pouch, still warm from the toll keeper's indifferent hands. Paper shields. Yes, but shields nonetheless. Before sleep, you consider the chain links, now coiled beside your pack. You keep one length as a reminder, an inconvenient souvenir, heavy yet honest. The rest will become scrap in some blacksmith's forge, melted into nails for a barn roof. Perhaps not every past must be worn in public. Some of it can quietly hold shingles in place and rust in peace. You drift off to the creak of willow branches and the soft crackle of embers. In dreams you return to the dungeon, but this time the door swings open, not closed, and the guards nod, bored, as you stroll out carrying a steaming bowl of porridge that tastes distinctly of victory. Then a rooster crows, mercifully distant. Dawn will come, patrols will come, but tonight the road ahead looks almost bearable, mapped in the flicker of firelight and the faint crinkle of forged parchment. Across the chapel, Wiggins chuckles in his sleep, perhaps composing new alibis. Clarence snores a hymn of exhaustion. You smile, nestle deeper into straw, and whisper to the darkness that once owned you, we're still moving. The darkness, unusually charitable, whispers nothing back. Sunrise smears peach-colored bruises across the ruined chapel's rafters, and you sit up to the cheerful revelation that your spine has become a lattice of complaint. Straw clings to your tunic in festive tufts. Clarence snores nearby, boots pointed east, in hopeful alignment with destiny, and Wiggins is already awake, sharpening a quill on a shard of roof tile, like a barber preparing to shave fate. The small fire has died to sullen ash. Outside, Melancholy the donkey contributes an opinionated bray to the dawn chorus before resuming his hobby of contemplating annihilation. Breakfast is half a loaf, gnawed by mice bolder than theology, washed down with water that tastes faintly of carp gossip. You chew in reverent silence, mentally rehearsing pilgrim humility, then help Clarence strap on his new boots. Still stiff, but miraculously both left and right. Wiggins rereads the safe conduct letters, sighs with pride at his own penmanship, and pockets them with the tenderness of a man storing gut feelings. The road to Hart Hill meanders between barley fields, dipped in dew. Clouds hang low like damp laundry, and skylarks gossip overhead about humans who underestimate mud. Clarence manages a respectable limp, now suitably theatrical, rather than medically alarming. Every so often, you pass a shrine to minor saints. Saint Diebald of compulsive apologies, Saint Winifred of rusted fountains, each sporting burnt-out candles and copper pennies flattened by wagon wheels. Wiggins donates one of your tin pilgrim feet to Saint Diebald. The shrine does not visibly approve, but its squirrel guardian snatches the offering with mercenary glee. Mid-morning, you crest a hill and spy Hart Hill Crossroads, a sagging inn called the Laughing Stoat, a blacksmith's forge, coughing sparks, and a scatter of stalls clinging to dignity in the dust. Dominating the square is Old Nan's wagon, avalanche of kettles, pans, ropes, and curiosity hanging from hooks like metal fruit. The wagon itself resembles a coffin married to a traveling circus, and now regretting both life choices. Old Nan sits on the tailgate, pipe clenched between teeth, eyebrows waiting half a second ahead of every expression. Her hat is a ruin of feathers, coins, and one live beetle of uncertain intent. Wiggins approaches, palms out, smile calibrated to harmless rogue with disposable virtues. Nan squints. Thought they hanged you last Lent? She rasps. They tried, Wiggins replies, but the rope flirted with my neck and eloped instead. Nan grunts amusement. Who's the eyebrowless ferret and his elderly ghost? You introduce yourself and Clarence with the solemnity of saints, adding the standard folklore about Saint Eustathius. Nan coughs a laugh that flings ash in a perfect parabola. Pilgrims, eh? I love pilgrims. They pay in stories, because money's busy elsewhere. Wiggins lowers his voice. We need southbound passage. Quiet, quick, no questions. Nan taps her pipe on a dangling saucepan. Quiet and quick. Cost extra, because questions are free. She gestures to a row of coffins leaned against her wagon, like recalcitrant guests. Dead folk travel easiest. You fancy an early rehearsal? Clarence blanches exactly the shade of parchment in winter. You ask, ventilation. Breathing's an optional upgrade, Nan says. But these models have discreet peepholes. I'm not a monster. She pats one coffin. Dust billows like ancient gossip. We load you onto a merchant barge tonight. Guards poke cargo, not corpses. Superstition trumps diligence every time. She names a sum, 10 silver pieces, or equivalent in favors that ruin reputations by sunrise. Wiggins winces. We're liquid only in metaphor. Nan eyes the donkey. That beast looks suicidal, but I could sell him to a glue boiler. Melancholy, sensing commerce, emits a dirgeful honk and bites a thistle in protest. Clarence offers his hazel walking stick. Nan snorts. I prefer debts. Owe me a miracle later. She flicks ash. Deal? You and Wiggins exchange bleak optimism. Debts you can postpone. Silver you cannot conjure. Deal, you say, shaking her hand, which feels like parchment, soaked in river stones. Nan snaps into logistics mode. Dusk loading. Stay invisible till then. Blacksmith's barn is full of hay and apathy. Convince him you're cousins of his second wife. She tosses you a burlap sack, brimming with dubious garments. Hooded mantles reeking of camphor, gloves with more holes than theology, and broad hats wide enough to shade collective embarrassment. Pilgrim wardrobe deluxe, she winks. You usher Clarence toward the forge, leaving Wiggins to negotiate coffin upholstery density. The blacksmith, a man whose arms appear on loan from a siege engine, turns out to adore pilgrims, especially those offering free prayers for the prosperity of horseshoes. He grants you corner space among hay bales in return for your vow to sing a hymn praising anvils. Clarence manages 3 verses before coughing fits sabotage the chorus. Inside the barn, time drips like cooling tallow. You stitch your new disguise, a mantle long enough to hide chain souvenirs, gloves to conceal calluses that shout recent shackles, and the hat which kindly shields your lonely eyebrow from sunburn. Clarence dozes, dreaming of rooms without corners. Wiggins returns, smelling faintly of linseed and moral ambiguity. Coffin's ready, he reports. Nan even carved little crosses, so we look respectable in demise. Afternoon slides toward evening. Market stalls fold like defeated card houses. The inn disgorges patrons, lubricated against regret. A fiddler scrapes out a jig, while 2 youths argue theology with their fists. You all keep to shadows, rehearsing the art of being present only in theory. Just after sunset, Nan wheels her wagon behind the inn, where a dirt lane leads to a creek dock. Lanterns bob on moored barges. Water slaps hulls with impatient applause. Nan beckons. You and Clarence climb into separate coffins, padded with musty burlap. The interior smells of cedar, old incense, and whisper-level panic. Nan lowers curved lids, leaving thin gaps near your nose. Darkness tightens like a promise. Outside, thumps signal other crates joining the cargo ballet. Sacks of barley, barrels of pitch, a crate labeled relics, do not question. Voices approach. The barge master and a guard check manifest. Nan's rasp floats confidently. 2 bodies. Monks from North Ven died of ennui. Bishop wants them buried near relics. The guard mutters a curse about holy logistics, stamps his seal, and recommends sprinkling lavender to mask inevitable seepage. Boots clatter off. Ropes groan. The barge nudges into current. Inside your cedar cocoon, you count heartbeats until they overlap. Fear, exhilaration, claustrophobia, waltzing in trinary time. The coffin dips as the barge meets midstream sway. Water hushes close, river-breathing secrets. You picture Clarence in the neighboring casket, probably composing regretful haikus about oxygen. Wiggins is somewhere aft, maybe disguised as a barrel of lamp oil, maybe sipping contraband ale. Hours pass, measured by cramps. Occasionally, the barge scrapes against submerged debris, jolting you into rehearsal of your final breath. At some point, you fall asleep, dreaming of dungeon chains melting into violin strings, only to jolt awake when the barge grinds against a landing stage. Voices bark orders. Cargo shifts. Your coffin tilts, then stops. Latches click. Lid lifts a fraction. Wiggins's whisper brushes your ear like an overdue apology. Sure, he says. Keep dead until the lantern's gone. Light sweeps overhead, then fades. The lid swings wide, unveiling star-swollen sky and the silhouette of Wiggins, grinning like crime-discovered sugar. You inhale river air thick with willow scent and mosquito ambition. Clarence emerges, blinking like a mole offered philosophy. Nan stands on the dock, pipe ember glowing. Debt begins now, she says. First installment, help me unload these bales before dawn. Second installment, someday I'll ask a favor, shaped like madness, and you'll oblige. You and Wiggins nod. Clarence salutes with his walking stick, which Nan accepts as collateral, promising to return it when honesty retires. Unload you do. Bales, barrels, crates heavier than certainty. Night hums, with frogs practicing gossip. When the last cargo thuds onto the dock, Nan wipes her brow. Follow the east track 2 miles until it meets the King's Road. Then choose any future that runs faster than rumor. She flicks 2 copper pennies toward you. Pilgrim alms. Buy mercy if you find a stall that sells it. She vanishes into the barge's shadow, coffins in tow, whistling a tune that sounds like ironies, colliding. You, Clarence, and Wiggins tread the track, lanternless, each footstep rewriting the map. The road gleams faint under moonlight, bordered by hedges, murmuring about travelers who forget they're breakable. At a bend, Wiggins stops. Listen. Hoofbeats. Steady, approaching from behind. He drags you both into a ditch perfumed with nettles. A mounted patrol trots past, banners limp but helmets alert. The lead rider calls, keep eyes peeled for coffins missing occupants. The company laughs, spurs on. You hold breath until echoes melt. Clarence mutters, we are rumors galloping faster than ourselves. You help him up. Nettles have expressed opinions on his shins. Wiggins studies the retreating patrol, face split by that entrepreneurial grin. Time to upgrade disguises, he says. Pilgrims are yesterday's script. Tomorrow we're tinkers, minstrels, maybe plague inspectors. They get marvelous access. You sigh, adjusting the wide hat. I was fond of St. Eustathius. Wiggins pats your shoulder. Keep him. Saints travel light. We just change the costumes around him. Dawn stains the horizon, bruise pink before you rest in a hollow beneath hawthorn trees. No fire tonight. Smoke tattles. You share Nan's parting gift, a parcel of rye biscuits that require enthusiastic dentistry, but taste like survivable mornings. Clarence dozes first, walking stick replaced by a dream of its return. Wiggins sketches escape routes in dirt, plans fracturing like spider webs into contingencies within contingencies. You watch the sky bleach toward day, realizing freedom is a staircase with endless missing steps. You climb, you stumble, you keep climbing, because sitting still invites the chains to catch up. As light creeps, you bury Nan's copper pennies beneath a stone. Seed money, you joke, for the first shrine of St. Eustathius, the fugitive. Wiggins nods solemnly, vows to commission relics shaped like broken shackles. Above, larks begin rehearsals. The world, impossibly, readies itself for ordinary business, while you and your improbable companions rehearse anonymity one sunrise at a time. You close your eyes, let exhaustion stitch them shut. Somewhere, a rooster prepares its opinion. You hope it oversleeps. Tomorrow will demand fresh alibis and sturdier lies. But tonight, or what little remains, you allow yourself a blank slate of sleep, unchained, unsigned. The river, out of sight now, keeps rolling south, carrying whispers of monks who died of ennui in coffins that sailed on without them. And should the water ever gossip your real names to the next patrol, you trust Nan's pipe smoke, Wiggins's ink, Clarence's battered boots, and your own stubborn heartbeat to invent brand new ones before sunset. Approach to Brackenford is guarded by a toll gate, manned by a solitary constable who regards travelers with the suspicion of a cat presented with a salad. He sees your party, sniffs the vinegar aura, spots the pustule badge, and physically recoils. Purpose of visit? He croaks, from a distance suitable for trebuchet warfare. Wiggins steps forward, brandishing his wax tablet like a holy writ. Official plague inspection. Pursuant to His Majesty's Hygienic Proclamation III, Section 4, Subclause Panic, he flicks open the tablet, revealing lines of stylized scrawl, and, in one corner, a doodle of a rat wearing a crown. The constable pales. Has plague been reported? Not yet, Wiggins says, lowering his voice to a confidential murmur the entire county could hear. But rats seldom send advance notice. Our job is prevention. Sniff out pestilence, isolate infected sundries, confiscate questionable cheeses. He pauses, surveying the constable's lunch, a suspicious wedge of blue-veined dairy perspiring on a plate. The man panics and tosses the cheese into a ditch where it emits a hiss and begins digesting weeds. Access granted. Inside Brackenford, the high street bustles with midday barter. Barrows of apples blushing like gossip, smithies hammering arguments into horseshoes, and gossip itself hammering everything else. You stride through, exuding hygienic menace. Shopkeepers retreat into doorways. A gaggle of children scatter, shrieking with the delighted horror reserved for insects and tax collectors. Clarence limps behind, clutching the vinegar jar as if it contains the last hope of civilization. The inn, the Silver Heron, squats at the square's far corner, its signboard depicting an animal that resembles a disillusioned goose. Inside, ale fumes mingle with the philosophical stench of overcooked cabbage. A stout landlady, wearing an apron embroidered with passive-aggressive flowers, greets you with practiced wariness. Rooms or rations? Wiggins flashes the carbuncle badge. Inspection. We require sustenance to maintain regulatory vigilance. The landlady's eyes widen at the word inspection. She hustles you to a secluded table and summons stew, bread, and ale with the urgency of someone bribing a small deity. While you eat, the stew is alarmingly enthusiastic about garlic. Wiggins conducts a mock survey of the premises, tapping beams, sniffing barrels, and peering under benches for contraband rodents. Every so often he jots a mark on the wax tablet and mutters, suboptimal curvature, or potential vector for melancholia. Patrons watch in mute horror. Between spoonfuls, Clarence leans over. We cannot impersonate plague inspectors forever. Eventually, someone literate will compare our credentials to reality. Wiggins tears, bred in contemplative chunks. Correct. Therefore, we leverage inspector status for immediate benefits. Free food, minimal scrutiny, then pivot to a new identity before the ink dries. You swallow garlic aggressive stew. What identity next? Shepherds. Jongleurs. Wiggins's eyes sparkle. Traveling miracle merchants. Clarence chokes on ale. Miracles are difficult to counterfeit. Not so, Wiggins counters. People want hope bottled. We provide illusions sturdy enough to bear optimism's weight, collect payment, then vanish before skepticism matures. You raise a wary brow. And the inventory? Simple. Wiggins produces 3 small vials from his satchel. One filled with river water, another with powdered chalk, the third with Nan's leftover vinegar, steeped with bruised mint leaves. Combine chalk with water for instant holy milk of St. Mildred. Allegedly cures boils. Mint vinegar mixture repels feverish humors when sprinkled counter-sunwise. As for the third miracle, he taps your battered chain links coiled at your belt. One fragment presented as a shackle of St. Leonard, patron of prisoners, Touch it, and chains will break. In spirit, at least. Clarence rubs temples. We're evolving from cunnings to heresies. You prefer dungeons? Wiggins asks gently. Clarence sighs. Proceed. Lunch concluded. You settle the bill with a benevolent wave of the plague badge, leaving the landlady vowing to scrub every surface with lie and prayer. Outside the inn, Wiggins requisitions an abandoned fruit cart for your new traveling stall. You drape it with a burlap cloth, arrange the vials in a triangle of dubious sanctity, and affix the shackle fragment to a candle stub for dramatic glint. Clarence fashions a sign from grate slat and charcoal. Portable miracles, donations, welcome, healing probable, refunds uncertain. The market square gradually repopulates as word spreads that the inspectors have pivoted to divine retail. Your first customer is a farmer whose complexion resembles a distressed turnip. He complains of aching joints and an ungrateful goat. Wiggins prescribes 2 drops of mint vinegar sanctifier in the goat's trough, and a pilgrimage of 7 clockwise circles around the nearest scarecrow. The farmer pays in eggs and suspicious trust. Next comes a widow clutching a moldy handkerchief. She seeks relief from sorrow and mildew. You offer the chalk water elixir, promising inner brightness and outer bleach. Her donation, a silver thimble and 3 nails, blessed by her late husband's persistent hammering. Business blooms. Within an hour, your cart overflows with bartered goods, onions, wool skeins, a cracked lute, and 1 extremely motivated ferret in a basket labeled Tempest. Success, however, draws flies, specifically the town bailiff, a tall man whose helmet plume compensates for a receding sense of humor. He strides over, flanked by 2 deputies. Licenses, he demands, voice pitched like a disappointed sermon. Wiggins bows. We operate under the ecclesiastical charter of peripatetic mercy, issued by, he invents a cathedral on the spot, the See of St. Dymphna, in the fen. He produces the plague inspector tablets. The bailiff sniffs. Unrelated documents. Selling remedies requires apothecary warrant or monastic endorsement. You note the deputies eyeing the miracle stall with hope, thinly disguised as hostility. They want free samples, but also want to appear stern. Time for theatrics. You grab the shackle relic, raise it palm outward, and declaim, Behold the chain of Saint Leonard. Legend says it binds only liars. Should any man of authority doubt our sanction, let him grasp the link. If falsehood taints his heart, his hand will stiffen until confession. The crowd hushes. The bailiff hesitates. Deputy 1 quietly pockets his hands. Deputy 2 scratches an ear studiously. Pride battles superstition on the bailiff's brow. Finally, he scoffs, but steps back. See that you depart town by nightfall. Any complaints of fraud and chains, saintly or otherwise, await. He spins on his heel. Plume, listing under the weight of unsatisfied curiosity. Relief swells like bread, left too near the hearth. Clarence releases the breath he borrowed from yesterday. Wiggins grins. Theater, cheaper than bribes, and twice as filling. Afternoon wanes. You tally earnings. 2 dozen eggs, 8 onions, several minor coins, fermented turnip wine of uncertain legality, and the ferret, which adores chewing cuffs, and appears to regard Wiggins as a chew toy of destiny. You christen it Providence for irony's sake. Clarence insists it's a sign of fortune. Wiggins worries it's a sign of fleas. Preparations to leave commence. You sell the cracked lute to a minstrel who claims it improves his tragic ballads by remaining silent. Coins acquired pay for 3 travel cloaks, dyed the color of ambiguous dusk. ideal for blending into forgetfulness. Clarence's boot receives emergency reinforcement with the widow's nails, hammered by an obliging blacksmith, after you promise the disposition of 5 imaginary souls in purgatory on his behalf. By twilight, cart unloaded and disguises refreshed, you slip through the southern gate. The constable there waves eagerly when you mention a rumor of plague north of town. He plans to quarantine his mother-in-law. You leave Brackenford behind, its rooftops reddening under the dying sun, like rooftops always do when they've narrowly missed an anecdote in the Plague Chronicles. A mile beyond, the road forks toward the coastal shire of Eldersmere, Wiggins's chosen waypoint. Rumor says Eldersmere Harbor hosts smugglers who export felons disguised as dried cod, sardines, or if stature allows, luxury eels. You vote unanimously for cod, fewer bones. Camp that night nestles in a hayfield abandoned for crop rotation. Stars scatter overhead, indifferent, yet reassuring. Providence the ferret explores the perimeter for philosophical truths among grasshoppers. Clarence soaks his feet in a puddle, sighing hymns of blistered gratitude. Wiggins scribbles profits and deficits on the wax tablet, calculates that miracles yield better margins than plague inspections, but carry higher theological overhead. He proposes diversifying into relocation services for surplus relics. In short, stealing bones from oversubscribed saints and selling them to underperforming chapels. You suggest a nap before further heresy. Sleep creeps in like a forgiving tax collector. You dream you're back in the dungeon, except the walls are built of stacked coins, and each coin bears Nan's smirking face. Clarence sleeps talking about holy goats. Wiggins sleeps with quill in hand, writing verses on the wind. Providence curls atop your chest, tiny heart ticking assurance that every chain can become a key if gnawed correctly. Before dawn, church bells faint on the breeze. Brackenford's matins, perhaps, or another town already suspicious of miracle inflation. You listen, half asleep, catalog your identities. Prisoner, pilgrim, plague inspector, miracle peddler, soon to be cod. None feel complete, yet each is a stepping stone across a river, forever widening. The important thing, you realize, is momentum. Keep stepping, keep inventing. Let yesterday's lies compost into tomorrow's alibis. Somewhere ahead, Eldersmere Harbor smells of salt, tar, and possibility. Beyond that, open sea, distant coasts, where your names rhyme with freedom rather than warrants. But first sunrise, new disguises, and the small matter of convincing a smuggler you're worth more alive than salted. You smile in the dark, an absurd, defiant grin. The dungeon is a memory. The road is a story you're still writing, one forged parchment at a time. Morning hatches from the horizon like a reluctant chick, chirping fog across the hayfield where you, Clarence, Wiggins, and Providence the ferret have turned sleep into an awkward origami of cloaks and bruises. Dew beads on your beard, clarifying that pilgrim come plague inspector turned miracle. Merchant is not a profession known for indoor accommodations. Wiggins wakes first, scribbling fresh alias concepts, vinters of holy vinegar, itinerant psalm tuners, licensed goose mesmerists. Before the parchment of his mind dries in the daylight, Clarence stretches, winces as his boot bites back, then reports that Providence chewed through one lace in the night, possibly in devotion to Saint Leonard, patron of fetters and footwear sabotage. Breakfast is raw onion and an egg traded yesterday, boiled in a tin cup balanced on hedge embers. that stubbornly impersonate fire. You crack the egg to discover it contains 2 yolks and 1 existential question. What becomes of fugitives who reach the sea? No one answers, so you eat it. The onion follows, ensuring your conversation radius can be measured in astronomical units. Eldersmere lies a half-day's trudge southeast, according to a milestone you pass after an hour of marching. The stone reads Eldersmere, 6 miles, as the crow flies, 8 miles, as the honest man walks, variable, as the cartographer drinks, which you take as encouragement to maintain a flexible relationship with distance. Providence rides in Clarence's satchel, occasionally erupting to hiss at passing beetles, then returning to his philosophical nap. The landscape shifts from patchwork farmland to salt-cured heath, where scrub oaks crouch like conspirators and gulls wheel above, rehearsing indictment. Your disguises evolve again. Wiggins has repurposed onion skins into a faint yellow tint for your cheeks. Sailors sunburn inward out, he insists. Clarence dons a ragged scarf streaked with ash to imitate tar stains. You tie a wide kerchief around your head and practice squinting at horizons, the occupational reflex of anyone claiming to be seasoned by tides. By noon, the air tastes of brine and risky enterprise. Eldersmere itself reveals little at first, just rooftops poking from fog that smells of wet rope and unpaid port taxes. Approaching from the north, you skirt salt pans where workers rake crystals into mounds luminous as guilty consciences. A foreman lifts a handed greeting until he spots Providence, who brandishes incisors the size of moral dilemmas. The foreman chooses continued livelihood over conversation. The harbor appears suddenly, a scimitar of water edged by crooked quays, each hoisting masts and convictions in equal measure. Warehouses squat behind, painted in colors last fashionable, when plague doctors still offered bulk discounts. Over everything looms the harbor watchtower, its bell promising to ring for fires, raids, or amusing gossip. Wiggins halts beneath a sign depicting a cod embracing a barrel. The salty widow, he reads aloud. According to Nan's footnote, Captain Marlowe drinks here at noon, trades by dusk, and flees creditors by dawn. Ideal resume. You straighten your kerchief, tuck the chain fragment deeper under your cloak, and usher Clarence through the tavern door into a haze of pipe smoke and promises left fermenting. Inside, the widow is all dark beams and darker humor. Sailors clutter tables, arguing in dialects that sound like anchor chains debating theology. Behind the bar, a woman with shoulders broader than the straight outside polishes mugs with a rag that died years ago. Wiggins scans the clientele until his eyes snag on a man whose coat resembles a stitched-together night sky. Patchwork navy peppered by brass buttons, tarnished to constellations. Captain Marlowe, presumably, currently arm wrestling a deckhand while reciting bawdy limericks in meter, but not in taste. You approach. Providence peeks from Clarence's satchel and bares teeth sweetly. Marlowe notices. By Jonah's beard, that's the fiercest bilge rat ever seen stuffed in a purse. Sit, strangers, before it uses my thigh bone as a flute. Arm wrestling paused. He gestures to vacant stools, then studies your faces as though estimating their salvage value. Wiggins opens negotiations in a dialect, equal parts flattery and bribery. Captain, we bring wares, most delicate, ourselves. 3 passengers of no consequence seeking quiet passage to the southern coast. St. Osyth's Bay, perhaps, or any latitude where our reputation won't arrive ahead of us. Marlowe leans back. Chair complaining like a snapped sail. Passengers of no consequence draw the highest consequence when nabbed by the harbor watch. Fugitives, are you? Relax. Smugglers seldom judge. The fee is 20 silver. Payable half now. Half when your footprints touch a different jurisdiction. You possess exactly 12 silver worth of odds. Eggs, onions, and a miracle market, now 50 mile behind. Wiggins slides the captain 2 minor coins and a proposition. Alternative fee, 1 miracle with resale potential, plus a ferret capable of clearing weevils from any grain hold. Providence hisses stage ready. Marlowe strokes his beard. Show me the miracle first. Ferret second. You retrieve the shackle link. Place it on the table where candlelight discovers each pitted scar. Relic of St. Leonard, you recite. Breaks every chain in spirit and many in practice. Touch it during a storm. Any iron about your vessel will slacken, freeing her from anchors, or, should customs officers arrive, fetters. Marlowe raises an eyebrow, arching enough to sail under. Prove it. He produces a dagger, slams point down to the plank. Chain loop attached to pommel for tavern security. You press the relic against the link and whisper an entirely improvised prayer. The chain, rusted thin, obliges with a pathetic plink, breaking free as iron fatigue colludes with luck. Sailors gasp. The barmaid stops mid-polish. Captain Marlowe's eyes gleam, like ducats dropped in grog. Deal. He grins, pocketing relic and dagger in a single sweep. Providence, however, resists conscription. When Marlowe reaches, the ferret launches up his sleeve, traverses coat interior like a furry earthquake, and pops out the collar, clutching one of the brass buttons. Chaos ensues. Tables overturn, ale drenches, saints and sinners impartially, and the harbor watch bell tolls once. Warning or applause, hard to tell. By the time Marlowe extricates the ferret, offering it the liberated dagger chain as compensation, 2 watchmen stomp through the entrance, truncheons raised like unresolved conversations. Wiggins leaps onto a barrel and announces plague inspection. Old habit resurfacing. The air, still fragrant with onion and panic, cooperates. Patrons scatter. The watchmen hesitate. They've heard tales of inspectors confiscating kidneys for testing. In the confusion, Marlowe hustles you through a back door into an alley congested with nets, crates, and moral ambiguity. He leads you across planks, slick with century-old fish memories, to his vessel Starling, a ketch whose timbers sigh under cargo, disguised as legitimate. Sailors haul crates labeled pickled herring that slosh suspiciously like contraband brandy. Marlowe ushers you below deck into a hold aromatic of tar and treachery. Your accommodations. He gestures at 3 enormous codskins, giant hides scraped clean and cured stiff. Slip inside. Customs officers rarely probe fish beyond olfactory capacity. We sail with the evening tide. Clarence pales, envisioning claustrophobia, seasoned with haddock. Wiggins shrugs. Better than coffins. At least fish come with gills. Symbolically. You shrug too. Anonymity seldom smells of lavender. Marlowe hands each of you a candle stub and flint. If air grows thin, poke a hole. Whistle, the bold grenadier. My crew knows to ignore that tune. He cackles, climbs the ladder. Hatches slam. Darkness crouches. Codskin interior feels like damp parchment, embracing your entire being. You breathe through your mouth. It tastes like the dictionary definition of regret. Providence, secured in a crate of sea biscuits, rattles indignantly. Clarence mutters psalms revised to mention fish. Wiggins counts seconds between creak and splash, mapping the crew's preparations. Hours simmers. Rats thump overhead. Either Providence escaped or the vessel comes with complementary vermin. Eventually, muffled shouts signal cast-off. The starling lists, then rights herself as sails billow, catching wind that smells of storms on other people's horizons. You imagine coastline shrinking behind, watchtower bell tiny and helpless, dungeon walls, Brackenford miracles, plague badges, all recede into silent footnotes. Somewhere near midnight, voices echo closer, distorted by hatch seams, customs officers in perfunctory raid, boots clomp, barrels tap, crates pride. Someone complains about fermented eel fumes. Marlowe insists his cargo honors, lent in every measurable way. The officers descend, thump cod barrels, sniff, gag, retreat. One kicks your hide. You freeze, heart detonating quietly. He swears about bloated monsters and stomps away. Silence dribbles back. Then a whisper. Wiggins. 2 skins over. We are now internationally unscented. Clarence whispers, I left my boot heel in the Widow. You whisper, consider it a votive offering. Providence squeak laughs somewhere aft, presumably chewing through maritime law. By dawn, claustrophobia becomes tactile. Condensation dapples the cod skin like guilty tears. You fumble the flint, spark a brief candle peak, cramped walls of salted hide, your face pallid, eyes wide as poached eggs. Sparks die. Darkness resumes ownership. Hours later comes the pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, Marlowe's signal. Hatches open. Fresh air spills like absolution. You emerge onto deck, squinting at a coastline unfamiliar. Jagged cliffs rise, hunched beneath gulls, drawing punctuation in the sky. The captain grins. St. Osyth's Bay, gentlemen. As promised, the crew offloads crates. You offload trauma. Clarence hobbles onto sand, kisses ground that tastes less fishy than your wardrobe. Wiggins stretches, notes the miracle stall potential among cliff caves, but files idea for later. Providence bolts toward driftwood, terrorizing crabs who thought exile meant fewer predators. Payment. Marlowe returns the shackle relic, now looped as his lucky chain, but keeps the ferret, promising visiting rights. In exchange, he waves off the remaining silver ode. Call it even for the best tavern entertainment since the goat rode the chandelier. You gift him the onion skin sunburn recipe. He promises to prank a rival captain. Farewells are swift. Smugglers despise sentiment. It delays schedules. Starling unfurls sails like pale lies and glides seaward, leaving you 3 fugitives, plus ferretless complications alone, on a pebbled shore. The next chapter, open like a ledger, awaiting creative accounting. Behind, a goat track snakes up cliffs toward green hinterlands, buzzing with opportunities to commit identity fraud in fresh dialects. Clarence adjusts his twine-lashed boot, sighs at its loyalty. Wiggins surveys horizon, eyes reflecting waves and schematics. You inhale salt, feel lungs expand against memories once cramped like codskins. Space enough now to house hope, or at least cunning. New names, Wiggins announces. New trades. Suggestions? Clarence raises hand. Shepherds were floated earlier. Sheep seldom request paperwork. You nod, envisioning serene hills, wool, and quiet nights, where the only chains are around ankles of bells on ewes. Wiggins grins, pulls quill from his hair, inks names in air. Very well. Brother Shepherd, sister sheepdog, and cousin counting stars reporting for pastoral duty. You laugh, startled by freedom's sound. A gull screams overhead, misunderstanding the punchline. You pick a direction. Southwest feels gentle, and together begin the ascent, each footstep shaking. Fish scales from cloaks, each breath tasting a little less of dungeon damp, a little more of tomorrow. St. Eustathius, St. Leonard, St. Dymphna, all saints of unlikely journeys. Watch from wherever overworked guardians sip celestial vinegar, maybe amused, maybe horrified. Either way, you're too busy climbing to care. Halfway up the cliff path, Clarence pauses, gazes back at the bay, where the starling dwindles to a white dash. Do you suppose Providence will be happy as a ship's ferret? You shrug. He seems the entrepreneurial type. Wiggins adds, ferret today, mascot tomorrow, admiral the day after. The idea pleases you all. Ambition, after all, is merely escape velocity for small bodies. As sunlight kindles gorse flowers around you, the road ahead rises like a question mark. You march toward it, armed with stolen boots, forged parchments, and the unkillable certainty that identities, like chains, are only as strong as people agree they are. Somewhere sheep bleat, waiting for shepherds who used to be prisoners. Somewhere bells toll, but today, thankfully, none of them are yours. The cliff path delivers you onto a plateau where sheep wander in languid spirals, nibbling heather with the solemnity of philosophers. Their bleats drift across the moor like unresolved arguments answered only by the wind. By afternoon, you have crossed 2 miles of gorse and arrived at a hamlet so small it shares a single chimney. The cottages clustered round it like shy cousins. A crooked sign identifies the place as Crookshaw, either a jest or an omen. The villagers eye strangers with the mixed curiosity and dread usually reserved for eclipses. But the moment Clarence announces you are shepherds seeking lost ewes, suspicion folds into sympathy. No one here can afford to turn away free labor, especially when lambing season looms like an unpaid debt. Old Mistress Bramley, matriarch by age and volume, assigns you a pasture on the far slope and 3 dozen sheep that look as if they were knitted by hurried angels. She expects no wage beyond diligence and the occasional psalm sung over the flock. Lambs like music, she insists. Wiggins nods sagely while taking mental notes on ovine behavioral patterns, most of which he later converts into speculative merchandise ideas. Wool dyed with miracle pigments, perhaps, or pilgrimage shawls, guaranteed to repel plagues and proposals. You spend your first evening in Crookshaw, mending a stone wall that sags like Clarence's boot, trading muscle aches for credibility. By dusk, the flock beds down in tufts of moonlit bleached grass, and you 3 collapse beside them under a sky swollen with stars. Shepherding, you quickly discover, is both simpler and more treacherous than smuggling yourself inside codskins. Days start before sunrise. You boot stray lambs away from gullies, disentangle ewes from brambles, and argue with rams convinced every hedge insults their ancestry. Clarence proves patient, whistling soft hymns that tame even the most existential sheep. Wiggins, meanwhile, invents a counting system using pebbles and dubious Latin, which he claims discourages wolves by baffling their arithmetic. You smile more than you mean to. The rhythm of honest, if monotonous work kneads your nerves into something resembling peace. The peace fractures on the 4th day, when Reeve Harker arrives on a bay mare, cloak snapping in gusts. His face carries the geometry of suspicion, sharp angles of brow and jaw, designed to impale falsehoods. He claims routine audit of pasture leases, but his gaze lingers on Wiggins's ink-stained fingers and your single eyebrow. Strange shepherds, he muses, for men who smell of tar and salt. Wiggins improvises a tale of a coastal sheep trade gone awry. You add color by describing non-existent storms that swept your old flock into the sea. The reeve listens, then asks to see your drover's tokens. Small wooden discs every licensed shepherd carries. Naturally, you possess none. Silence thickens. Clarence coughs. A lamb bleats an editorial comment. Just as Harker's eyes harden toward arrest, Providence erupts from a stone crevice, racing across his mare's hooves like a furry cannonball. The mare rears. Harker tumbles into a thistle patch, sputtering curses that would blister saintly ears. Sheep scatter. You three rush to corral them, presenting an image of shepherdly devotion so persuasive even the reeve, untangling burrs from his dignity, concedes you may be amateurs rather than criminals. He departs with a promise to return at week's end for those tokens. Have them ready, or have an explanation fit for chains. Wiggins salutes with a grin that would make a weasel proud. That night, around a turf fire, the weight of impending exposure settles heavier than wool on a wet day. Wiggins declares forging drover's tokens a straightforward carpentry task, though he admits lacking the necessary emblem, the Earl of Eldersmere's crest, a hound rampant over waves. Clarence recalls seeing such a crest carved into a market cross in the larger village of Linwick, 2 valleys east. You volunteer to fetch a rubbing of it for replication, leaving the others to mind the flock and keep Providence from staging further equine sabotage. You set out at dawn with a crooked staff and a pocket of oatcakes, following a sheep trail that threads bracken and foxglove. The moor exhales mist that smokes around your boots. Skylarks annotate the silence. Midway, you pass a derelict watch hut where someone has carved a familiar symbol on the lintel, the carbuncle badge Wiggins once wielded. Beneath it, in hasty chalk, the words Watchman's Rest. Ask for Len. Your pulse quickens. Allies sprout in odd soils. You log the information for later, should flight require fresh roots. Linwick thrums with sheep fair bustle, bleeding crowds penned between ale tents and wool merchants. The market cross rises in the square, its stone base dressed in decades of moss, the Earl's crest weathered but intact. You kneel, press parchment and charcoal, and capture its lines. Hound, wave, motto half erased. Before you finish, a peddler hawking ribbons bumps your arm. Charcoal skews, adding an unintended flourish set. You frown, then realize the flourish could serve as a subtle maker's mark, differentiating your tokens from legitimate ones. A signature of sorts only you and Wiggins would recognize. Fortune, it seems, still drafts for your team. On return, you encounter a shepherd boy, sobbing over a lamb, caught in a snare. The trap's teeth bite deep. You use your chain fragment, still sharp from codskin days, to pry it open. Boy thanks you with 2 copper clips, crude tokens bearing the very crest you seek. Poachers drop them, he explains, to mislead constables. You pocket them, marveling at synchronized coincidences, then hurry home where Wiggins already whittles wooden blanks while Providence dozes in a wool basket, dreaming of maritime promotion. Over the next 2 evenings, the barn becomes a clandestine mint. Clarence files edges smooth. Wiggins carves the crest by candlelight, using the charcoal rubbing for reference and add in your accidental flourish as secret brand. You stain the discs in boiled bramble juice, to simulate age, then rub them with lanolin so they smell convincingly ovine. By dawn of the Reeve's return, 12 tokens rest drying like quiet conspirators on a hay bale. Reeve Harker rides in before breakfast, flanked by 2 men-at-arms. You present the tokens with an air of rural boredom. He inspects the crest, the patina, even the lanolin scent. Nothing betrays you, yet suspicion clings. He quizzes your flock logs. Wiggins recites pebble counts in flawless but meaningless Latin. Clarence hands over a ledger of lamb weights, mostly invented based on which animals looked emotionally heavy. Harker, overwhelmed by data and distracted by Providence, reappearing to steal a saddle strap, finally concedes your legitimacy and advises worming powder for a ewe coffin on thistles. When the Reeve and his retinue vanish down the track, you exhale as though lungs discovered a new gear. Wiggins proposes a celebratory scheme. Sell half the tokens to genuine novice shepherds lacking paperwork, but you veto. Fortune's patience is not infinite. Instead, you 3 sit on the pasture wall, sharing stewed apples Mistress Bramley delivered in gratitude. Sheep graze, sky widens, and for once the horizon does not resemble pursuit. Late that night, while Clarence sleeps and Providence crafts tunnels through hay, Wiggins confesses he has never stayed in one guise this long. The urge to move, to reinvent, twitches like a flea under the skin of his confidence. You admit the pastoral lull feels fragile, as if silence itself could shatter at a careless hoof. Yet you both agree there is uncommon peace in open skies and problems measured in sheep, not warrants. The next morning delivers new complications disguised as opportunity. A messenger from the Earl of Eldersmere gallops into Crookshaw, announcing a royal wool levy. Every flock must send 24 prime fleeces to the castle within a fortnight. Mistress Bramley brings her apron. Losing that much wool will gut winter stores. Wiggins's eyes glint. The levy wagon will need record keepers, drovers, maybe even scouts. Positions perfect for men comfortable forging tallies and dodging questions. Clarence worries about leaving the flock. You worry about leaving anonymity, but the messenger's proclamation leaves little choice. Either comply and starve, or resist and hang. That night, under a new moon, you, Wiggins, and Clarence debate by lantern. Wiggins sketches a plan on the barn wall. Volunteer as levy escorts, doctor the fleece counts en route, siphon surplus to Crookshaw and yourselves, then disappear before the castle. Clerk reconciles totals. Clarence hesitates until Providence curls on his lap, purring incentive. You stare at the chalk lines, roads, checkpoints, time frames. The geometry of escape reshapes itself yet again, this time wearing sheep's clothing and noble seals. You each place a hand on the plan, pact sealed not by chains or relics, but by the shared knowledge that static honesty can be as deadly as active deceit. Tomorrow, you will present yourselves as humble shepherds, eager to serve the Earl. Tonight, you savor the hush of the hillside, memorize the constellation above the barn. The crooked Y that Wiggins claims is St. Leonard's broken shackle, and let its faint light stitch courage into your muscles. In the paddock, sheep mutter in dreams of endless grass. You wonder what they would think if they knew how many identities their guardians have worn in a single season. Then you realize sheep never ponder yesterday or tomorrow. They trust the hand that leads them at dawn. You smile into darkness, resolved to keep leading, into valleys onto levee roads, through lies that serve a greater mercy. A shepherd's crook, after all, is simply a chain bent until it guides, instead of binds. Dawn arrives, bearing the color of watered milk and the taste of unfinished confessions. You, Clarence and Wiggins, trudge to the Crookshaw Green, where the Earl's levee foreman, Master Quince, a man whose mustache appears to be plotting conquest, has erected a tally post. 2 other villages have already delivered their fleeces, bundled in sacking like slumbering ghosts. Mistress Bramley stands with her knuckles white on a crook, eyes glittering between dread and reckless optimism that your promises will keep winter from gnawing her family. Wiggins bows to Quince, presenting the forged drover tokens with a flourish that would impress a bored archangel. Shepherds, at your service, good master. We volunteer as escort and scribes to ensure his lordship's righteous count. Quince squints at the tokens, noting the discreet flourish, your accidental signature, then shrugs. Fine. I care little who tallies, so long as wool arrives. He hands Wiggins a leather ledger, heavier than some moral burdens, and waves at the gathered bales. Load them. We roll on the hour. You and Clarence ferry Crookshaw's fleeces to the wagon, officially 24, secretly padded with 6 extra bundles, replaced by stones inside the barn. Back home, Mistress Bramley mouths silent thanks, then hustles away before conscience reconsiders. Providence the ferret pours the wagon's axle, ensuring sabotage potential remains within paw's reach. Clarence distracts Quince by recounting a fictitious omen about sheep that bleat in hexameter, a performance so sincere even the mustache pauses its annexation. At departure, the levee column consists of 2 wagons piled with fleeces, 5 men-at-arms riding flanking positions, Quince on a mule, and your trio perched atop the rear wagon, nobly volunteering to guard the wool from bandits, moths, and theological uncertainty. The road snakes east, through heather and stone walls crouched like weary boarders. Each jolt sends a gentle lanolin perfume into the air, coating your lungs with the peculiar comfort of greasy innocence. Wiggins sets to bookkeeping, inked quill dancing, like a dragonfly over columns labeled Village, Fleeces Owed, Fleeces Received. For Crookshaw, he writes 24 lines through the 6 extras, and a footnote in mock Latin, Mercedem Misericordia, payment of mercy. You keep watch for patrols and moral epiphanies. None appear. Clarence hums lullaby psalms that soothe both sheep and conscience. By mid-morning, the column reaches Gorswell, a larger village whose steward, Sir Donnet, greets the levee with the glee of a man forfeiting his favorite kidney. His wool is stacked high, 40 bundles, but he insists 5 are still drying and cannot be moved. Quince fumes, threatening fines. Wiggins steps in, proposing a practical solution. Transfer Gorswell's full count on paper now. Leave 5 Crookshaw bales as temporary pledge. Collect them on return. Donnet, thinking himself clever, agrees. Quince, seduced by paperwork completion, stamps the ledger. Wiggins slyly marks the 5 Crookshaw bales with chalk runes only Providence understands, and your wagon grows heavier by net 16 fleeces while appearing lighter in obligations. Lunch break under an ancient oak becomes strategy council. Wiggins sketches wool redistribution plans in breadcrumbs on a cheese rind. Total levy is to be 94 bundles, of which 30 will fall off the back before reaching the castle gate, diverted to Crookshaw, and perhaps a black market factor in Linwick who pays in coin rather than hunger. You voice concern. Each extra bale reduces the weight that arrives, inviting scales and suspicion. Wiggins taps the ledger. Numbers bend easier than wagons. We simply adjust tear weight, include an anecdote about shrinkage from damp. Clarence suggests setting aside the poorest fleeces for the scam. Thinner wool, less risk to us if discovered. Providence seconds by nibbling a low-quality bundle until it resembles confession. Afternoon miles carry the column along a river shimmering like melted pewter. Rain clouds marshal at the horizon. Guards complain of boredom. You chat them up with tales of plague inspections, which they politely file under nightmares and change topic. Quince rides ahead, rehearsing speeches of accomplishment for the Earl. Wiggins whispers odds on whether Quince survives his own paperwork. 5-1 he forgets his ledger. 2-1 he misreads it. Even odds, he chokes on mustache hair mid-presentation. Clarence cough laughs, nearly falling from the wagon. Near dusk, the column enters Brambleford, a market town bustling with cider fumes and rumors. Here the tally grows again, but Wiggins deftly credits only half the incoming fleeces, claiming the remainder belonged to a prior levy still en route. The local reeve, awed by the carbuncle badge Wiggins flashes for nostalgic menace, signs off without counting. You redistribute 2 low-grade bundles to a cider merchant who, in gratitude, supplies 6 bottles of fortified courage. Camp that night settles in an abandoned orchard. Guards pitch tarps. Quince pores over the ledger, muttering suspiciously, but finding no numeric heresy. Wiggins offers him cider. Quince, patriotically thirsty, surrenders to fermentation and soon snores beside a moth-eaten banner. Under canvas, by lantern's sickly glow, you, Clarence, and Wiggins sort the spoils. You've skimmed 14 fleeces so far. Providence volunteers as softness tester, burrowing into each bale until only his tail remains visible. Clarence raises a question thicker than fleece. Are we thieves or rescuers? Wiggins replies, sometimes salvation wears robbery's coat. The difference is whose winter you warm. You stare at the glowing lantern, remembering dungeon walls colder than any more, deciding who deserves warmth, maybe the only real freedom you have left. Rain arrives at midnight, drumming on canvas like bureaucrats demanding entry. You sleep fitfully, dreaming of sheep wearing codskins, of the Earl knitting warrant parchment into scarves. At dawn, mud clings to boots like regret. Quince, head throbbing, trusts Wiggins to update counts while he reacquaints his stomach with regret. You ease the wagon forward, wheels slurping through puddles. 2 villages later, you've diverted 26 fleeces in total. More than enough to keep Crookshaw clothed, maybe enough to fund fresh identities should flight become essential. But as the castle of Eldersmere heaves into view, gray towers stabbing a sullen sky, anxiety expands beneath your ribs. Stone walls are simply dungeons standing taller. Inside them, accountants lurk sharper than any chain. The levy courtyard bustles with scribes in velvet hoods and officials who smell of ink and power. Quince dismounts, smoothing mustache and handing Wiggins the ledger for final totals. 94 fleeces. You help unload. Real bales first. Doctored stone filled ones stacked last, hoping they remain unweighed. A steward named Master Abbey, a man whose face suggests he ironed it to fit his cowl, supervises. He directs porters to scales, calling weights to a scribe. Sweat pricks your spine. First bale, proper weight, noted. Second, acceptable. 15. A chalk-marked pledge from Gorsewell. Clarence distracts Abby, by asking which saint blesses fleeces against moths. Wiggins, behind the steward's back, nudges the scale beam with a tucked foot, offsetting missing wool. Providence, sensing tension, stages a diversion by erupting from under a porter's tunic. Pandemonium. Porter shrieks. Veil topples. Sheepish chaos. Literally. While guards chase Ferret, Wiggins alters 3 weight columns in the ledger, so losses appear as brat weight variance due to prolonged wetting. Abby, restoring order, reviews the adjusted columns, frowns, reweighs 2 bales, luckily real. He signs. Relief crashes through you like tidal gin. Quince beams, believing himself hero of logistics. An underclerk distributes scriptum vouchers, promissory notes, payable after royal audit, to each escort. You receive 3. Their wax seals still warm, currency light enough to carry across counties. Task complete, escorts dismissed. You retreat through castle gates before some celestial auditor realizes columns don't sum. Outside, Wiggins proposes immediate disappearance. Clarence insists on delivering stolen bales, Brookshaw first. Compromise. Hide the bales in a cow byre 1 mile off, then return later, under moon. On the road north, you encounter Reeve Harker, leading a small patrol southwards. His eyes narrow at sight of your cart empty of wool. Providence squeaks a greeting from Clarence's satchel, tail adorned with a crimson ribbon, filched from some castle maid. Harker notes the ribbon, then your new vouchers, and grunts. Seems shepherding paid well. Wiggins grins. We diversified into ferret taming. Lucrative market. Harker shakes his head, perhaps amused, perhaps cataloging suspicions for later. You reach the byre at dusk. The stolen fleeces sleep under tarpaulin. Mistress Bramley, summoned by secret whistle, arrives with 2 farm lads and a borrowed ox cart. Tears gleam on her cheeks as she strokes the wool. Each bundle, a winter night fled. She presses a small chest into your hands. Payment in silver pennies and hard cheese, then departs before gratitude sounds like guilt. You watch her lantern bob away over the ridge. Clarence leans on his crook, weary but glowing. We did it, he whispers. Wiggins pockets the vouchers, clinks the chest. Enough funds to travel east, maybe buy a real farm where sheep believe us from the start. You imagine a valley where names are born, not borrowed, where chains rust unnoticed under wildflowers. First, departure. Rumors of a crooked levee will sprout like mold by dawn. You hitch the empty wagon, Providence riding scout atop the yoke. The road forks, west toward the sea again, east over the hills, south into other earldoms. You choose east, the sunrise direction, the one path you haven't used to escape yet. As wheels crunch gravel, Wiggins hums a lullaby you once heard in a dungeon, but now feels heavier with promise. Clarence joins 2 notes behind, harmony frayed but hopeful. You add a whistle off key, because freedom rarely sings in tune. Night folds around, hiding castle spires and guilt alike. Somewhere ahead, a border you've never crossed awaits the signature of your footsteps. You glance back once, just a pasture, a barn, and a sky where constellations rearrange themselves. Fresh paragraphs. In their shifting grammar, you read a single imperative. Keep moving. Providence chitters agreement. You flick the reins, and the wagon rolls into darkness, scented faintly of wool, ink, and the uncharted pages still to be written. You cross the county line beneath a sky so clear it seems to have mislaid every cloud, as though even weather has decided to grant you one indulgent blank page. The milestone chipped, lichen speckled, claims the domain ahead belongs to the Marcher Lord of Rookhaven. Famous in tavern rumors for hawks, harsh taxes, and a taste for traveling musicians. Wiggins interprets this last detail as providence. Clarence interprets it as an omen. Providence, the ferret, interprets everything as chewable. The road descends into valleys stitched with orchards, the air sweet with fermenting apples, nature's apology for winter. 3 miles in, you spot the bannered gate of Rookhaven's market town, Crownford. Twin ravens, rampant over a broken crown, flapping above a timber palisade, whose timbers honestly gave up rampant years ago. At the gate, a board guard reads a broadsheet titled Warrant for Wool Waylayers, complete with sketch of 3 felons who look nothing like you, but uncannily like the people you once were. He glances up, notes your new costumes, ragged cloaks dyed elderberry blue, Clarence's shepherd crook now masquerading as a minstrel stage prop, Wiggins carrying a lute pilfered from Brambleford's silent minstrel and restrung with fishing twine. The guard waves you through, too engrossed in the broadsheet to connect ink with flesh. Inside, Crownford sprawls around a river bend, streets looping like cursive, penned by an indecisive bureaucrat. Wiggins steers you toward the Goose and Teasel Inn, a sprawling, half-timbered warren humming with midday trade. Over trenchers of pork and pear stew, you agree on your final, grandest disguise, an itinerant troupe of ballad sellers known as the Wandering Legerdemains. The name delights Wiggins, intrigues Clarence, and induces Providence to chase the letter G around a scrap of parchment. Preparation begins before the stew cools. Wiggins sketches a handbill, promising songs to soothe sheep and saints alike. Clarence composes a refrain featuring a virtuous ferret liberating prisoners from codskins, an allegory so veiled it might as well be wearing 3 veils and a hood. Your role, percussion, performed on an upturned cheese crate with spoons. Rhythm, Wiggins insists, is 90% confidence and 10% plausible accident. Evening finds you performing in Crownford's cider square, torches popping sap overhead. A small crowd clusters, farmers, apprentices, a beadle suspiciously counting penny donations. Wiggins launches into the opening ballad, fingers dancing across the lute's twine strings, voice gravel soft but sure. Clarence hums harmony, crook tapping a beat. You spoon drum like a tavern revenant summoned by rhythm. Providence, perched on your shoulder, squeaks counterpoint at critical cadences. The absurd magic works. Coins clink into a cap, 3 copper groats, 2 half-farthings, 1 foreign trinket bearing a sunburst. Coins are nice. The applause is better. A proof that reinvention can pay in more than survival. For an hour you're not fugitives. You're artisans of momentary wonder. But wonder attracts attention, and attention is a currency too volatile to hoard. Near the encore, a man in Lord Rookhaven's livery applauds politely before clearing his throat with fiscal authority. His lordship invites talented strangers to perform at tomorrow's harvest court. Payment, 5 silver each, and supper at the high table. The crowd gasps. Such invitations are rarer than honest bookmakers. Behind your polite bows, panic scribbles footnotes. A lord's court means scrutiny, guards, possibly earl-to-earl gossip regarding levy malfunctions. Wiggins smiles and accepts before you can protest. Later, in the inn's attic room, he justifies, we can't keep fleeing. At some point, we must stand still long enough to become someone else permanently. Court favor buys protection, maybe even charters. Clarence points out it may also bind nooses. You, undecided, polish a spoon until your reflection looks like a man who once believed freedom tasted of hay and lanolin. Sleep arrives piecemeal. Providence burrows in the straw tick. Clarence dreams aloud about sheep knitting sweaters for shepherds. Wiggins mutters chord progressions to a ballad still embryonic. You dream of a staircase looping back onto itself, a dungeon disguised as progress, until dawn's gray touch shifts possibilities again. Harvest Court assembles in Rookhaven's Manor Hall, a stone spine ribbed with beams dark as thunder, long trestles grown under roasts, and bread trenched deep enough to float stews. The Lord himself, a tall hawk nose in velvet the color of midnight confessions, sits on a dais beside a woman whose smile could appraise jewels without touching them. Courtiers murmur, sliding you glances as you set up near the hearth. Performance begins with Clarence's ferret ballad, retooled so the ferret now symbolizes industrious vigilance against moths, a theme comfortable for wool-minded nobles. Laughter follows at appropriate stanzas. Even the Lord's severe face loosens. Faint retrieval of youth. Wiggins segues into a love lament where the beloved is a runaway loaf of bread, a sly nod to stolen fleeces, cloaked as carbohydrates. You drum spoons, syncopated heartbeats that ease tension from your shoulders. Halfway through the set, a herald whispers in Lord Rookhaven's ear. The Lord raises a hand. Music halts, like a cart hitting rut. Your artistry pleases us, he says, voice carrying the authority of anchored ships. But the court must first resolve pressing county concerns. Reeve Harker, step forth. Your bowels discuss evacuation. Into the hall strides Harker, suspicion incarnate. He bows, then presents a parchment describing levy discrepancies, missing fleeces, and 3 shepherds recently vanished eastward. He does not name you, but sketches likenesses, eerily accurate, now that time allowed memory to sharpen. Gasps ripple. Courtiers' faces pivot toward your trio. Providence emits a nervous trill. Lord Rookhaven studies you, head tilted. Wiggins steps forward, lute lowered. My lord, we encountered those shepherds upon the road. Your pulse stutters. Improvised lies again, but he continues calmly. They confessed losing fleeces to bandits and begged us carry confession to authority. We bear written testament. He produces the Gorsewell pledge slate, silvered words aligning with his story, and offers it to the dais. The hall's tension palpably rewrites its own narrative. Harker demands the slate. Lord Rookhaven waves him silent. Bandits, the Lord muses, grow bold to steal his majesty's wool. He turns to you. Can you identify these thieves? Wiggins, ever courageous, bows. Only their camp on the southern heath, my lord. With escort, we can guide soldiers there. Your guts twist. This is audacity dancing on a guillotine. But clarity strikes. Lead them on, far from Crookshaw, while any final audit flounders. The Lord snaps fingers. Captain of the guard steps forward. At dawn, Rookhaven orders, take these minstrels as scouts. Feast resumes. Appetite flees. Clarence whispers, we're volunteering for a manhunt that ends at our own doorstep. Wiggins answers, unless we redirect the hunt. He outlines a dawn strategy. Lead guards to Blackmere Fen, infamous for swallowing carts. Stage an ambush of imaginary bandits who disappear into bog. Leave guards mired while you 3 vanish south. Providence nods sagely, chewing goat cheese stolen off a platter. That night, instead of betting, you craft illusions. Stuff old cloaks with reeds for distant silhouettes. Prep lanterns with green-tinged fish oil for eerie glow. and carve crude arrow shafts from orchard switches, tips blunted, evidence of skirmish without harm. Clarence mixes mud and charcoal into blood-like paste. Wiggins scribbles a forged bandit manifesto, blaming drought and taxes. You gather 3 stones shaped roughly like hearts, morbid trophies to spook superstitious soldiers. Dawn bleeds pale when the escort, 6 guards plus Captain Varen, meets you at the gate. Harker, conspicuously absent, perhaps to guard his own hypotheses, leaves only his mustache of suspicion hovering in memory. You lead the party south along heath paths until Blackmere Fen yawns, its fog dense as swallowed vows. Reeds rattle, unseen frogs judge from murk. You halt in a stand of alder. Camp lies yonder, you whisper, pointing into mist where your reed mannequins slump. Varen signals 2 guards forward. They advance, lantern light diffusing, then vanish abruptly in squelch and curses. Fog pockets hugging boots. Panic blooms. More guards rush. Mannequins topple. Arrow switches ping off helmets. Someone screams as Providence, released into action, scampers beneath cloaks, squealing bandit curses in ferret dialect. Chaos completes itself when your blood paste splatters reeds under Varen's lantern, convincing him fatalities hide nearby. Amid shouting, Wiggins grasps your arm, nods to Clarence, and sprints east where fog thins to stripes. You flee, hearts hammering, yes, yes, yes. Behind, orders bark, reeds crack, but fen mud clutches at pursuit. Providence emerges like a guttering comet, leaps into Clarence's arms, fur slick, eyes ecstatic. Hours later, fog dissolves into sunlight, streaking a dusty crossroad. No hooves follow. You slow, gasping, alive. Wiggins laughs, a sound halfway between child and outlaw. Clarence weeps quietly, not sadness, but release, tears tracing soot on cheeks. Providence war dances in circles, celebrating undefined victories. At the crossroads stands a weathered signpost, west to the coast again, north to shires under earlier shadows, east to the kingdom's border, and beyond it, territories where your names are still blank parchment. Wiggins lays a silver voucher on the sign's base. Payment to the road, he says, for services rendered and secrets kept. Clarence plants his shepherd crook beside it, symbolically resigning. You add the chain fragment, the last iron memory of the dungeon. Together, relics gleam before dust settles over them. You choose the eastern path, not because it is safest. Rumor speaks of petty warlords and languages tangled like briar, but because its unknowns are honest, not inherited. As you walk, Wiggins begins composing a new ballad. The minstrel, the shepherd, and the ferret of fortune. Tale admittedly unbelievable, but then so is survival. By noon, the road follows a river whose water runs clear, unmemorized. You stop at a ford. Sheep graze its banks untended. Providence inspects them. Apparently satisfied, no fleas require liberation. Clarence cups water in his palms, drinks, smiles at its chill. Wiggins turns, surveying horizon one last time. Whispers farewell to every guy's left behind. Ready? You ask. Ready, they reply. You wade the river together, current tugging but not toppling. Midstream you pause, feel the pull of both banks, past and future, balanced on water's song, then push on until pebbles clatter beneath fresh boots. On the far shore, the world seems fractionally lighter, as though gravity misunderstood your new identities and reduced its grip out of courtesy. Behind, dungeon bells lie quiet. Wool levies misunderstand their counts, and Saint Eustathius, patron of perpetual exile, adds 3 more wanderers to his improbable flock. Ahead, fields ripple under wind, Foreign birds trill names you haven't stolen yet, and every mile bank is a promise you're still at liberty to keep or break. You shoulder packs, adjust hats, and step forward. None of you knows what the next chapter holds. Perhaps codskins again. Perhaps honest pasture. Perhaps a tavern where ballads harden into legend. But one certainty paces beside you like a loyal shadow. So long as roads fork and lies bend, and courage occasionally pretends to be stupidity, you will keep walking. Providence chitters, tail high, as if to shout the final moral on behalf of all chained things now free. The story isn't over. It just ran off ahead to scout. And with that, you follow. Boots drumming a new rhythm. Spoons tucked for future stages. Hearts sinking to a tune nobody else has written. Yet